Hello and welcome to another week of chess openings with me, Zach Slagaski, as we go over all the main openings that you will learn when playing chess. This week we're going for the Ruy Lopez opening with white. There's so many different variations. It's a very theory heavy opening. So this is going to be a very large series on a bunch of different variations that you will probably encounter when playing the Ruy Lopez as a beginner. This week we're going to start with the Berlin Defense, which is a very common opening you'll see when playing the Ruy Lopez. There's a couple different variations. The main line variation being the Berlin Wall Defense. The second being the anti-Berlin Defense variation, where black can best fight off the Berlin Wall attack. And the third is a couple different sidelines that you might see when playing the Ruy Lopez against the Berlin Defense. So let's start off with what the Ruy Lopez is and how do you set it up? So you first start off with the e4, black will go e5, we go knight to f3, and they will go knight to c6. And this is very common opening that you'll see a lot, which is why the Ruy Lopez is so good, because you'll play a lot of games like this as white with this opening. From here, what we want to do for white is kick this bishop out over here to b5. Instead of going to c4 like in the Italian game, we go to b5, attacking this knight. Now, what happens from this move forward determines the variation of that you will be playing with the Ruy Lopez, and the main line is the Berlin Wall. So to get to the Berlin Defense, what you get is black going knight to f6. From here, you do the very controversial move that you wouldn't necessarily make as white in this position, and it's a castle, leaving this pawn undefended. And the reason is because we don't really need the pawn, and we kind of want, it's kind of like a bait and trap kind of situation. If they do take, what we want to do is kick up to d4 immediately, pressuring this pawn. The knight will kick back, and what we want to do is we want to take the knight with the bishop on c6. They'll take back, opening the d file with the queen. We'll take on e5, kicking the knight out over here to f5, and then we trade queens. This is what's called the Berlin Wall Defense, and it's the main line for the Berlin Defense. From here, you want to go h3. King will go over here to e5, trying to protect itself behind this pawn. We'll develop our knight. They start pushing up to h5. We develop our bishop. They'll bring their bishop to e7, trying to get to castle. We bring out the rook here to d1, while they bring in the bishop out here to e6. We then attack that bishop by moving the knight here to g5, and black defends it by going here to h6, defending this. So what black wants to do here is they want to move this king over here behind the pawns on the king side. We will continue developing our bishop, and this basically finishes the development for white. We're trying to now exchange pieces, find ways to attack. So you might be saying, hey, early on when we push our pawn up to d4, what happens if black takes it? Is that really a bad thing for us? And the answer is no, and we'll show you why here. If they go to the Berlin Defense, we castle, they take the pawn, we push up to d4, and if they take here and e takes d4, we take with the knight. If they exchange, we move the queen, and we got a nice little attack on this knight here. If they bring it back, we put the king in check, and if they bring the bishop, we have the queen over here taking the pawn on g7. The best move is moving this f5 pawn here according to the engine. We take the rook, they move the king, we keep taking up, and after taking this bishop, we keep putting him in check, and as we just keep running him farther and farther away from his base of operations, we check him on f3 with a nice pawn checkmate. So the best thing for black to do is not to take on d4, because it could just lead to disaster for black. Now you're thinking, why should I want to exchange in this variation? Like, what if I want to keep my queen? The reason you want to trade queens is because after the queen trade, if we don't trade here and we just say, hey, we're just going to go over here to e2, we're not going to take the queen, it shows an even game on the engine. But as the game plays out, they'll trade. They bring the queen out here. We get rook to d1. They bring the queen out here. We don't trade because there's the bishop barreling down here, so we try to attack with the pawn. They bring the knight out. Black now has a half-point advantage. So it's advantageous for white to trade the queens there. Don't be afraid of doing it. So there's a couple different traps that you have to look at for white when you do the Berlin Defense. And the first is the Mortimer Trap, and the next is the fishing pole trap. So the Mortimer Trap is pretty simple. Once we get into the Berlin Defense setup, instead of castling, if you go d3 here, and black kicks out the knight over here to e6, you might be thinking, hey, free pawn for us. And then that's where the trap lies, because what happens if we go c6 attacking this bishop? If we bring the bishop out, the queen now comes out, puts the king in check, you got a free knight. And after moving the knight, queen takes, you're down. And the other trap that we want to look for is the fishing pole trap. And that is started when we go into Berlin Defense, we castle, and they don't take the pawn, and they go over here to g4. We bring out the pawn here, attacking the knight, and they just bring out this h5 pawn here, defending the knight. Now, the thing that you do not want to take is the knight, because once they do that, you have a nice open file for black, and it can lead to a lot of problems. And so from here, the main line of the fishing pole trap is you don't necessarily want to move your knight, because you have the queen coming out over here to h4. So what you try to do is get to c3, trying to push to d4. And what happens is if the pawn takes, we can bring the queen out here, but then the queen coming out here leads to a nice, easy checkmate. There is really not much of a way to stop it other than to sacrifice your queen. And you're in a worse opposition. You're already down 2 points for there. It's not good. So that's the Berlin defense for the Ruy Lopez. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps me out a lot. I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/ZachSlagowski, where I play these variations every day. Next up, we have the Ruy Lopez variation. That video will be here. We'll see you then, and you have a fantastic, wonderful day. Goodbye.